Does that apply for out-of-state inheritance to a person who lives in Florida who inherits? So this comment was in relation to a video I posted about inheriting from a Florida estate. So when someone who either lives in Florida or lives outside of Florida inherits from an individual who lived in Florida and owned their assets and their property in Florida, I commented on the way inheritance tax works. And for Florida, there is no state inheritance tax. We follow the federal guidelines. And currently, federally, an estate for an individual can be worth up to $13.6 million before any type of inheritance tax would be applied federally. And for a married couple, it's $27.2 million. The total value of the estate before there would be an inheritance tax on the estate. Now that is because Florida has its own rules on inheritance tax, and Florida has decided that as a state there is no inheritance tax, which is why we follow the federal guidelines. Each state gets to choose what they're going to do. So some states do not have inheritance tax, or sometimes called death tax, but some states do not have that, and they just follow whatever federal law says. Other states, however, have a total separate state tax connected with inheritances from their state. So this is very much dependent on where the estate is located. So where the person who passed away, where they lived and held their assets. If that state imposes some type of inheritance tax or death tax, then that would have to be paid at the state level. So remember, states, individually can decide if they're going to impose certain taxes on things. So whether or not there is a state inheritance tax or a state death tax depends on what the rule is in the state where the person died and had their assets. So that's why you always want to make sure that you consult with an attorney or a tax professional in the state where the assets were actually located and where the person lived and had their estate planning documents and their assets. Now, additionally, what's nice about living in Florida is monies received from an inheritance. So just like the direct money. So like money from a bank account. We're not going to get into income producing property and things of that nature, but straight money received from someone who passed away is not considered income for IRS purposes. So again, federal purposes. If I inherit $200,000 from a bank account and I take that $2,000, since that's an inheritance, since that money is an inheritance, the IRS doesn't consider it income. And since Florida does not have separate state income tax, I also don't have to worry about paying income tax on that money that I inherited if I live in Florida. Again, though, states are different on this, right? So some states do have income tax. Other states don't. And you do have to check the state in which you're living in to know exactly what's going to apply to you. So that's why it's very, very helpful when you're in this situation, meaning either you're planning on drawing up estate documents yourself, or even if you're listed as a beneficiary in estate documents like a trust or a will, or if you're just inheriting as an heir because the person didn't have a will, but you're inheriting under their estate because you are related to them. It's really important that you check with an attorney or a tax professional in that state so you know exactly what you do and don't have to report. You don't want to end up in a situation where you needed to report something as income and you did not. Or you definitely don't want to be involved in a situation where there was some type of estate tax due, but the beneficiaries took the money and didn't pay that estate tax. So it's a really good idea to talk to professionals in your state or in the state where the assets were located, and also in your state to see exactly what is taxable, what isn't, so that you know exactly what needs to be reported. You don't want something coming up years later where there's some penalty and you end up needing to pay more than you have to. So in this instance where the inheritance is applying to a person who lives in Florida, but the actual assets are out of state, that state might have its own threshold and its own rules on when an estate tax can be levied, depending on what state it is. So that is something that should be thoroughly discussed with whatever attorney or tax advisor is helping to distribute that estate wherever it's located, whatever state it's in. Again, you don't want to get into a situation where all that money is distributed, and if there was some type of inheritance tax, if it wasn't paid, it can create problems down the road. All right, I hope this answers your question. If there's any other questions regarding how estate tax works, or just estate planning in general, elder law, probate, and you're in Florida, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're at Cause Law Office, the non-stuffy attorneys, and the link is in my bio.